I am Leo Glover, Leo Montanez Glover, and there's a name, story behind that. But I was born in Louisiana, raised until I was somewhere around 12 or 13. Moved to Teddy Hall, Texas, and finished high school there, which is here in Deep East Texas. Then went to Houston, where I had lived off and on when I was a young kid, and went to work for the Texas Manufacturers Association, which was at the North Main Viaduct. On the top of the viaduct there was a business building there, and that's where they were located. My friend and I, Dale Stepp from home, were entered into a partnership in an apartment, but after a while in Houston, say for the summertime, we discovered that we were not able to keep up the apartment because we weren't making enough money to feed ourselves and much less pay for an apartment. So we went back home, and I decided I'd join the Navy. I think Dale went into the Marines. But that was in 1948, just 6 months after having finished high school. In September of 48, I entered the Navy and went to San Diego on a train to go through basic training there. Upon completion of the basic training, I went into what's called FA2PAC, which is Fleet Airborne Electronics Training Unit, and it was down next to the Mexican border. We had training for firing of machine guns, turret training, where you set in the turret and go flying by a stationary target, and then shoot as if we were in an airplane and all. And we learned things like that. Then I also was going to an electronics technician school at the same time there in San Diego, and was then assigned to the outbreak of the Korean War. I was then assigned to a patrol squadron, VP 892, which was a reserves patrol squadron located at Sangley Point in Seattle, Washington. All of these people were reservists who were familiar with the aircraft and were members of that organization. They brought the squadron down to North Island in San Diego. We had several months of training. They took people like myself who were in distribution at that particular time to go to units to place us in there to build up the main group of people of the squadron in order to fill out the complement to make the squadron full. I joined and was placed in a flight crew as a radar and radio operator on a flight crew, and there we did training with those people up and down the coast of California, dropping dummy mines, different things for training, whereupon we then transpacked, which is the movement of the complete squadron, men and aircraft, to Iwakuni, Japan. I was stationed on a seaplane tender there, which was the seaplane tender was Pine Island. It was located in the Iwakuni Bay, and it provided our quarters for us to stay on and eat our meals there on that place. And the squadron planes stayed anchored out in the bay, and when we needed to go out for a particular flight on nighttime, daytime, whenever it was, We would then go on one of the Pine Islands boats out to the aircraft and unload, get it cranked up, and taxi around, and then finally take off and go over to Korea, where we would do one of two things. We either provided patrol and at the guidance for big ships of the Navy, security for them around there during the daytime, or at nighttime we provided weather patrols around the mainland. In doing the weather patrols at night, we would then know what the weather would be the next day for the battlefields of Korea. And all of those activities were repetitive type. In other words, some aircraft would go one day and then other aircraft would go that night and different things. We just worked all of them in. While we were there, we had the one situation that in Iwakuni that I remembered more than ever is that they broke us out one night of our sleep and had us get dressed and get all of our paraphernalia on, and we went to the planes and we sat there and in the planes and taxied around on the harbor waiting for takeoff. And when we found out why we were waiting for takeoff and what we were going to do, it rather shook us up a little bit, because they had us planned to go into Korea to the Chosin Reservoir, which was the entrapment of the Marines and other people there, to pick up plane loads of people and men, soldiers and everything, and bring them out of the reservoir to safety to the south. And but no one realized that the skin of that PBM was only a very, very thin thickness, and one large flow of ice would have come right straight through the bottom had we landed where there was a lot of big ice pieces of ice or junk in the bay or in the reservoir. So after a while they decided that was not one of the better things to do, and so we then went back and listened in on the news in the ship about the breakout that they had in the reservoir, rather than trying to bomb it and break the ice up and have us go in. Other than that, it was a repetitive thing that we did. We went back to the States. We had a 6-month rotation in the war zone. Then we went back to the States for 6 months, went through some training, more training, came back in the fall, or came back after about 8 months or 9 months being out of the Korean War zone, and went back this time to Cavite City, which was the airport there, and a hangar and all for our crews and our aircraft in Manila Bay in the Philippine Islands. Now, we were down in the Philippine Islands, but we were still considered war zone people because we ran patrols up and down the China coast, checking the shipping going in and out of China, so that we could then tell what they were loaded with when they left Hong Kong, and where they were scheduled to go and didn't go. And we would take pictures at night, drop down to the sea level, ship level of the main deck, and take pictures of the ships. And then the next day we'd turn them into intelligence, and they would figure all that out. But we would have a big spotlight on the front under our wing, and would put it on that ship, and then people were looking out that particular side and all. As a radar operator on that, I often did a lot of navigation with the navigator, giving him points along the coast to keep our alignment with his projections. And then we rotated after another 6 months overseas on that, back to the States. We came back over to Iwakuni about 8 months later. So we actually had 3 tours at 3 different times or campaigns going on in Korea. We had 3 different tours for our seaplane outfit to the theater. I had 3 years I'd signed up for. We received the extra year of over in Korea during the Korean time was given to us by President Truman. He extended everyone in the military 1 year during the time of the Korean War. After 4 years, I got out in September of 1952. Went back to the University of Houston, went to college for a couple of years. Then I joined the Army. Joined the Army, and Korea was completely over with, but I went through all the training and the commissioning to be an officer. I was a pilot, helicopter and fixed wing. I stayed in the Army for 20 years, went to Vietnam on 2 tours, and then retired after 25 years in the military back in 1975. That's short and sweet enough.
I just got a couple questions.
Sure.
Where were you stationed at? Like primarily, like where was your main location?
Main location was San Diego stateside and Alameda Naval Air Station in California. That's A-L-A-M-E-D-A, just like it's Syllabus. And then when we went overseas, we were at Iwakuni, we were at Manila Bay, and we were at also on the beach at I'm trying to think, it's just below Japan. It's just not coming to me. We were at White Beach, was the name of the beach that our seaplane tender was located, and Okinawa. That's where it was, Okinawa, White Beach at Okinawa. So we had various ascended places that we were stationed. We also were stationed for a month or so in the Pescadores, which is a group of islands between the coast of China and Formosa.
So whenever you had enlisted, did you know that you were going to be in Korea?
When I had, no, and I was going in strictly to be in the Navy, and I was there shortly before, I believe, that the Korean War, or just after. I'm not sure whether it broke out in 52 or 53, but I knew that when I went in, I'd be going into aviation and be in the seaplane outfit.
Whenever you found out that you were going to be stationed in Korea, what was your reaction? Did you know where Korea was?
Yes, I do, and I've been keeping up with you know, the war and all that was going on over there, but didn't have any idea of how we would be utilized insofar as the seaplanes.
So what was your main reaction? What was your family's reaction to the war in your departure?
That I don't really know, because I was 17, 18 years old at that time. I had no family except for my mother and father at home. My dad had been in the Navy prior to that time, and basically what I was doing was following in his footsteps and going into the services, perhaps getting a better education, horsets type education, than I would be getting at home working for insufficient funds to live.
And what was your first impression whenever you arrived in Korea?
I actually never went there. Only flying over, never went there at any time during my 4 years. Only after When I went to Korea for the first time was whenever I was given a trip over there by the Korean Embassy in Washington, and the military attaches chose four of us from our group here to go there, and I was one of them.
Awesome. Can you tell me about your living conditions, like food, sleeping, clothes, weather?
Well, the weather was extremely cold in Japan during the wintertime, I felt like, but probably not as much as they had in Korea. And we had plenty of good food and places there on board ship. We had a regular Navy ship that we were on for a while. Toward the end of our tour in Iwakuni, that ship had to pull out and go somewhere else, and we were put on board, on the base at Iwakuni. At that time, the Australians were the base commanders and had their aircraft there, and they had Meteors and they had F-51 Mustangs. And the Air Force was on there as a supplement. They were running flights out of there into Korea, and so we were put into a barracks that was on that airfield there, but we still flew right out of the bay, and had a couple of hangars there on the docks that we'd do our work on. Because that used to be, years ago it was, during the World War II, it had been a Japanese seaplane facility. So it worked fine for us being stationed there.
Do you recall how much you were getting paid during the time?
Well, if you want to call it pay, I remember many times after I'd first gotten in that in the lowest ranking deal that I was getting somewhere around $28 a month. After I was in the flight crew and it started drawing flight pay, I went up to close to $50 a month. And then by the time I was getting out of the Navy during that time, I had gone up to somewhere around $75 to $80 a month. And that was it.
Goodness.
That was a big pay in those days.
Yeah.
We used to stand around and flip pennies. We got paid every 2 weeks, and if we didn't have enough money to go to the show, we'd all stand around pitching pennies until we got enough. 12 cents is all it cost to go to a movie. So we would get 12 cents, and here we'd go to the movie.
Oh my gosh, that blows my mind. Nowadays, if you're not making $70 or $80 a day, you're not in good shape.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
You would have been a millionaire back then if you were getting paid like that.
Uh-huh.
How was your relationships with other troops or even foreign troops?
We had real good relations, and we didn't care for it too much, but it was the Australians that were over the base. That's the only people that we had a close association with, and their food was at a lower quality than ours by a considerable amount, which was Bubbles and Squeak. If you've never had it, you'll never miss it either. It was sheep and some kind of carrot stuff or something like that. Anyway, they called it Bubbles and Squeak, and we'd have that all the time from our food. So needless to say, we would get us a pair of flight suit, in other words, and sneak into the line at the Air Force until they started checking IDs for people coming in, and they'd find our Navy IDs, and there we'd go out. We couldn't go in. But we used to slip in there and eat a good meal and drink. They had milk. That was a commodity that we didn't see all the time we were there, so we'd go in there and get our fill of milk and things like that, eating with the Air Force until we get caught, and then we'd have to go back to the Navy. They knew they were losing money somewhere.
What were some of the most difficult or dangerous, happiest, rewarding memories for you?
Well, some of the deals would be the friendliness of our group that we were together in the seaplane outfit, along with them being reservists having been called on active duty. Those that were brought in from the regular Navy at that time, which I was one of, we still formed a great working situation on our aircraft and everything. Now, We lost a couple of guys to various and sundry things. One of them went out drunk and riding a motor scooter, which he ran into a brick wall and it killed him, concussion, brain concussion. Other things like that, but those were just people that weren't paying attention to what they were doing, you know. We, I guess the thing that the Korean War that I remember more than anything was the problem with the Chosin Reservoir situation, but we didn't take part in it after all. And then the other thing was in regards to the weather at night that we'd be flying through at times. Ice and everything would form on our blades and slam across the end of the side of the deal, and that's enough to shake anybody up. But we would be flying through ice and snowstorms up there and checking and getting the weather, and then flying back in. We were tracked one night by a Soviet fighter out of I forget what the name of that base was, out of Russia over there, and it was a night fighter, so he stayed right on us until we finally got out and entered the Japanese airspace, and then we could let down out of all the clouds and all the rest of them all the time. We were up in the soup all the time. All we had was just a blip on our radar and tell us that somebody was back there. But we never had any problem otherwise. They wondered what we were doing, I think, more than anything else.
So you were never in really serious or battles or anything?
No.
You mentioned the Chosin Reservoir. Can you tell me a little bit about that and what that was?
About what?
The Chosin Reservoir?
Chosin Reservoir was where, and you got some of the guys that are going to give you information far better than I can. There's one man coming in here later today who is Felix, I forget what. Bird, Felix Bird, he was there. And Billy.
Jack?
He's going to drop, no, Jock, not Jock, but Billy, Lynn, Lynn, he's going to drop off a previous paper to you.
That's right.
Now, Billy was right there in it. He's still, to this day, suffering with his feet. And it's really, he was right in it. Billy, when we went to Korea on our trip back, I think it was in 69 or excuse me, it was 2009 or 2010 that we four went over there, and he was a speaker for our group to a symposium that they had, auditorium full, and he had tears in everybody's eyes because he really can tell you all the activities that went on and all. But I did not have any things like that except for the Chosin, and Chosin only by hearsay. I've got a booklet, but Felix has all the information. He still has a newsletter that he gets from his friends who were there also in the Chosin Reservoir. But otherwise, no, I don't have really anything. But I only was associated with it due to the fact that we were prepared to go there. Whether we did or not, we didn't know until it was already called off.
What was the impact of the war on your life after you returned home from Korea or from Japan? Did it impact your life in any way?
No, not really. It made me appreciate the fact that I needed to get in college and get a little more education, which I did. When I came back, I was back for going to school just immediately. I got back in No, September, and immediately went into University of Houston in September. And I got in a couple of years after I got married in '53. I was in '52. I came back. We got married in December of '53. And then I joined up in '56 back into the Army. And I was going to college in between.
You mentioned earlier that you've been back to Korea. When did you go back to Korea?
I think it was in
2010.
2010 that it was part of the Veterans Return deal. I think they have it every year. But that time was one of the times that it was an anniversary type. I believe it was the 60th anniversary at that time. And it was really an occasion. They had really rolled out the deal. We've got a DVD. I've got a DVD of all the activities at home that we went through and we were invited into there. And the people were just the most gracious people I have ever met. We were sitting there on the banks of the river, which at one time was the boundary between the Pusan perimeter place and the rest of the enemy. And this particular area was a big flat sandbar out there. They put up a lot of chairs, and there were like 3,000 or 4,000 people there. And one of the guys came up and talked to me and said he had gone and worked in the Fort Bliss Army place there, and asked if my wife and I would come back and meet his wife and family. So we said, sure, we'll go back there. Well, we went down one aisle and then turned left and went down another aisle, got right back toward the back, and all the time when we were walking back there, people were coming in from the sides of the aisles just to reach out and shake our hands and say thank you, and all the way. So we went a different way going back, and the same thing transpired. But they are the most gracious people and regardless of the age group, the older ones are really bless you about having been there. And it made us feel very good, very good. We visited a lot of activities there, places. General Lee was our main recipient of all of our tours and things. And he was the Korean attaché, chief of attachés up in Washington later. Came over, and I believe he's already gone back home now, but found out we had lots in common. He was born and raised on a farm. I was born and raised on dairy. And we had several meals together and a lot of good conversations. And I had him lined up to come here for our Korean War. We put on annually a Korean War Veterans Association a deal up at Gladewater, where we have a Congressional Medal of Honor recipient that's buried there from the Korean War. And we have grown to that where it's so huge. We're trying to get other people to come in and help us with it, but it is really a big event for the area. And there was a little notice in the paper this past week about it here in town, but we have been doing that each year, and we've had usually some attaché people from up in Washington who have come and been our speakers and such. But it's when always is when the Congressional Medal of Honor Day is, which is in March, the last Saturday in March or something like that, I'm not sure. But we have lots of years of photographs by Jim, our official photographer. Jim has a lot of those on hand, I'm sure. He's a bountiful supply of photographs of where we've been working on that KWVA MOH Medal of Honor ceremony out there.
There's no war in history that has lasted 60 years after an official ceasefire. What do you think that we have to do to put a closure on it?
Well, Uh, I really don't know. I'm not, I don't, Jim Gill probably is the person who is so rabid about closure on that war deal. But to me, I went right directly after that, about 2 or 3 years later, I've been in Vietnam, see? And so it doesn't bear on me as much as the two of them combined, not one in singular, and which the Korean War would be joining, I think, the only thing would be the ousting of the Northern Empire or whatever it is up there with the Fat Boys, and to have a combined force of all the nation. You know, you get rid of that 38th parallel line and all of the activities there, and let have free access to it back and forth like we did in with the Russians and all in East Germany. And when East Germany now has growth and everything, capital gains, you know, capitals, building and everything. We would have that in Korea. I hate to see the people in the Northern Korea, how they've been pushed down and held down and barely living. And the ones in the South are just absolutely phenomenal in everything they do. And I think that the best thing that would ever happen is if somehow or other they would either have a complete change of mind, or they would be taken down because of their atomic weapons and things like that. Because the country ought to be able to have intra operations just like they did in East Germany and West Germany, I think, after World War II.
Do you think it's important for younger generations to understand of the efforts and sacrifices that were made in Korea, or for Korea?
Yeah, and I think that one of the greatest ones that I have ever read, and I've read the citations several times there at the Medal of Honor ceremony going on, and that is the one about this young sergeant and all of his fighting that he did. And they ran out of ammunition. He went out into the area where they had killed some of the North Koreans, and we recovered their ammunition and their rifles to utilize to continue to keep them beaten off. And finally he was injured enough or shot enough that he lost the ability to use his legs and everything. He crawled around to different things. There were people hidden in defilade trying to throw the hand grenades at him. He killed those. He did, all in total, when they went back the next day, there was over between 500 and 600 dead North Koreans and Chinese there. And this was all because of his squad. And he said he kept them off while his squad retreated and went back to their own other lines. They had been cut off. And if you haven't read it, you need to read that citation, because it'll give you from a standpoint of what some people, heroic actions there were, this was one of them. And he was a magnificent person. And we have his grandson, and this time we had his great-grandson here. And we usually, we presented the flag last year to his grandson that flies over the grave. This year we presented it to his great-grandson, who's about 7 years old. And there's just nothing as no entertainment to it, but there's nothing that has more significant reference to the Korean War than what we do there each year.
Why do you think it's important for the younger generations to know?
Well, sometimes I wonder about the millennium, whether they have anything further than the end of their nose if they understand. Because when you look at some of the votings and different things that they have, you can't expect them to even know where Korea is, much less what the Korean War is. There should be, and we have a program that is going into high schools, and that's not an easy thing to do, even though we have plenty of photographs and things to show them and to tell them not just our story, but the story of the Korean War, because what we did was insignificant as to the entire war as a whole. And as a result of that, we're making some inroads with the Korean War Veterans Association. We could stand much more of it, though, a lot more of it, or of the presentations being made all over the United States.
Do you think that the Korean War Veterans Digital Memorial, what we're doing here, interviewing veterans, is important and necessary?
Well, I think it should be so it won't be lost as far as that goes. I don't know how exactly I'd say I'd use it, but it would be about a record. Now, I've done the same thing for this and for Vietnam back when the government itself was running interviews and all. I believe Howard Junior College was running an activity of where they had the people ask them questions and things similar. But it was basically Vietnam at that time and involved.
In your opinion, why do you think the Korean War is also known as the Forgotten War?
I think it basically that there was, due to the stalemate, if there had been a complete accomplishment of the mission, I think due to the stalemate that it is a continued conflict that is not really registered with them. They can't quite conceive what significance there would be. But if they would ever have any knowledge of the growth of that southern part of Korea, it's just something that's really amazing. We went over there, and I never saw where they had built so many high-rise apartment houses in order to place all of their countryside people into good living conditions rather than the village life that they were having. And other things were such as the city itself, and they also where you find these steel mills like they have and not have any natural resources to have the second largest steel mill in the world operated in there. And they import everything for it, yet they have that capability to achieve greatness with, you know, mainly with their brains. And Hyundai buying out Kia and has really brought that auto back from bankruptcy and from the precipice that it was going over. But they're wonderful cars now. And there's just so many activities just like that, in other words, where the people themselves, their ingenuity and their design, the desire to accomplish something for themselves, just they have that ingenuity and they just put forth the effort to do it. And there was high-rise buildings and apartments and especially businesses. We went into one place, and it's about in Seoul, about a 7 or 8 story building, large building, but it was all small businessmen with a little room no larger than this one that we're in, and they had their wares competing against maybe a guy next to them or one below or above them in a place. It's just like a, we would say, at our place over at Canton, where you have all of the people set their sales for up and this is the way it was in that one building. And it was, you could just walk through there floor after floor, and if you couldn't find what you wanted, you just weren't looking for it right in the right place.
Is there anything else that you would like to share as far as maybe, you know, what your occupation or your responsibilities were, memories or messages you'd like to share to preserve your legacy?
Well, I don't know of anything significant in that respect. I do know that we were involved with a very, very good reserve outfit, which is today, I don't know whether we could repeat such a situation with people coming in from the reserves. I don't know whether we are as prepared today as we were then and became prepared in nothing in regards to Korea. I wish that we had the backing of our government in all of our activities as we had it at that time. There doesn't seem to be that sharing or that feeling of the freedom that we do have and the activities that we can accomplish ourselves and what we've paid for that and how it has been paid for with the lives of the people over there. And I just don't think that we appreciate it. And that's one of the fallacies, I think, that so many guys feel. But you know, the same thing happened after the Korean War, happened after the Vietnam War, where people weren't accepted. When they came back, there's more of a left-leaning hierarchy that just does not accept that those sides of the